been a while since I have done a live stream for ASMR stuff, so we'll try our best. And so for today's live stream, or I guess tonight's live stream, I'm just going to be whispering a bunch of random things to possibly help you fall asleep. Let's see. And I'm realistically just going to be whispering a bunch of random nonsensical facts because that helps me to study and learn a lot of interesting things because I need to be studying right now. I'll make sure the audio's good. Alright. Oh, audio looks good. Okay, perfect. Alrighty, well, here we go. I'm gonna be doing some deep dive into some things. Yep, alrighty. Let's see. So the cells of the nervous system consist of neurons and non-neuronal glial cells. Neurons happen to be the permanent signal transmitting cells in the nervous system that are composed of dendrites because they receive inputs. And you also have the cell bodies and axons which send the outputs, so that makes sense. The dendrites and cell bodies can be seen on missile staining. What's a missile staining? So stains on the endoplasmic reticulum, it is not present in axons, and the markers include the neurofilament protein and synaptophysin. Central nervous system glial cells are neuroectoderm, with the exception of microglia, which derive from the mesoderm. Peripheral nervous system glial cells, crest ectoderm. Okay, this is making sense so far. So let's continue on. Make sure what the heck is going on. Oops. Alright. Yeah. So myelin, peripheral nervous system glial cells consist of the neural crest ectoderm, and that's that. Okay. The neural crest ectoderm. Oh yeah, they derive from the neural crest ectoderm. Now we have the myelin. It is a multi-layer wrapping of electrical insulation that are formed around the axons. And what do? They have to help to increase conduction velocity of transmitted signals through saltatory conduction of action potentials. Right at the nodes around here, so that help to increase the sodium channel density. Very good. Yep. Alright. We're looking good so far. And what else should we talk about? Let's see here. Okie dokie. Alright. I'm just making sure my stream is going alright. That there's no technical glitches. I think it looks good. Yep. Alright. Let's move on. So, central nervous system positive. Let's tab. How interesting. So physical support, repair, and removal of excess neurotransmitters. Component of the blood-brain barrier, oxygen fuel reserve buffer. Okay, largest and most abundant glial cell in its central nervous system. Provides reactive gliosis in response to neural injury. And okay, so that's astrocytes. It's the largest and most abundant glial cell in its central nervous system. And entering neuroinjury, they can lead to reactive gliosis. As neurotransmitters, a component of blood-brain barrier, glycogen fuel reserve buffer, GFP1, oligodendrocytes. They myelinate the axons in the central nervous system, including the second cranial nerve. Histologically, they have the fried egg appearance, so oligodendrocytes. Alright, that makes sense. Each myelinates many axons, so approximately 30. They're the predominant type of glial cell in the white matter. So they happen to be injured in multiple sclerosis, leukodystrophies, and progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy. Very interesting, huh? Okay. So predominant type of glial cell in the white matter. They are injured in multiple sclerosis, leukodystrophies, and progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy. Then we have pendicle cells, which are ciliated, simple columnar glial cells lining the ventricles and the central canal, the spinal cord, and the apical surfaces are covered with cilia, which circulate the cerebrospinal fluid. And then the microvilli, which help with the cerebrospinal fluid absorption. Okay, that makes sense. So once again, the ventricle cells are ciliated simple columnar glial cells lining the ventricles and a central canal of the spinal cord. The apical surfaces are covered with cilia, which circulate the cerebrospinal fluid. And in the microvilli, which help with the cerebrospinal fluid absorption. Again, apical surfaces are covered with cilia and the microvilli. And these cilia will help to circulate the cerebrospinal fluid, and the microvilli will help with the cerebrospinal fluid absorption. There are specialized ependymal cells called the choroid plexus that produce the cerebrospinal fluid. Then we have microglia, so this involves activation in response to tissue damage. So microglia can be activated in response to tissue damage. This then leads to release of inflammatory mediators like nitric oxide and glutamate, and then this not readily discernible by nasal stain. They are phagocytic scavenger cells in the central nervous system, and the HIV-infected microglia fuse to form multinucleated giant cells in the central nervous system, and HIV-associated dementia. So once again, HIV-infected microglia fuse to form multinucleated giant cells in the central nervous system. In cases of HIV-associated dementia. Alright, now let's move on to peripheral nervous system glial cells. So, the satellite cells will surround the neuronal cell bodies in the ganglia. surround neuronal cell bodies and the ganglia. And then the Schwann cells will myelinate the axons and the peripheral nervous system. And they're S1.100 positive. So they myelate axons and peripheral nervous systems, including cranial nerves 3 through 12. And then each myelinate a single axon. And so they happen to be injured in Guillain-Barré syndrome. Let's look at this diagram. So neurons of these satellite cells, the Schwann cells. Nodes of Ranvier, the oligodendrocytes, axons, ependymal cells, astrocytes, microglia. You just have to review what microglia does. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Alright, so parasitic scavengers, alright, HIV. I'm so tired, oh my goodness. Why shall I fall asleep during this live stream? That'll be funny. Okay. Physical support. Remove excess neurotransmitters. Blood-brain barrier. Glycogen fuel reserve buffer. Transmitter scavengers. HIV infected microglia fused to form. Okay. Treatment used. State. Okay, so exercise remove excess neurotransmitters. Glycogen fuel reserve buffer. Large amounts of abundant glial cells in the central nervous system. Gliosis aroused the neural tract. Okay. Start to make more sense now, hopefully. Yeah. Where was I? Yeah. Alright. So what else should I do? Okay. Oh, the neuron action potential. Yeah, that's important to know. Let's see. Actually, I need to redo this one reading assignment. 1 second. Oops. Let's get rid of that. Let me back this up. Okay. Need to find this reading assignment. Okay, let's read this thing. Oops, wrong document. Let's see another week. Okay, here it is. Let's start from this page. So, recently in an unrelated case, I was observing a pediatrician who I respect and who I've seen interact with families gently, respectfully, and compassionately. It was a tense, high-stress pediatric visit following treatment for an arm injury, potentially caused by child abuse. The conversation went like this. So the doctor says, so we saw on the x-ray that your baby's femur looks somewhat abnormal. The radiologist says it could mean that he had a cytomegalovirus early in his life, or it could be a normal variant. Do you know if any bone disease is run in the family? Okay. The patient's mother says, with a concerned facial expression, no. And then she took a deep breath and started to say something, but then the doctor says, okay, then it's probably just a normal variant that we can Sweetie, whoa, what just happened? I thought to myself, does mom know what a femur is? Does mom know what CMV is? Does she even know it's 3 letters, or did it sound like one word? CMV. How is she supposed to know what a bone disease is and a variant? That kind of sounds like, I don't know, what? But definitely not something you want your kid to have. I don't want my kids varying from normal, whether it's normal varying or not. If that sounds confusing, that's because it is. If I were that mom, I think I would have a lot of questions. I want to be reassured by one quick sentence. Alright, so, okay. Let's see, alright, this makes sense. Is it easy to make sure you're using layman's terms all the time? Of course not. It is never easy to code switch. It is difficult to go from writing a note or talking to a colleague in one version of English and then turn around and talk to a patient in another version of English. But people have to code switch all the time for different reasons. I would argue that just as we have a duty to serve our patients the best we can do, the best we can by doing things like keeping up with the latest research, practicing standard of care, practicing good antibiotic stewardship, etc. It is a non-negotiable responsibility that we learn to code switch so as to communicate equally effectively with patients and colleagues. The onus is on the doctor to make sure the patient understands, not on the patient to decode or look up the doctor's jargon. So, the data supports my argument too. Multiple studies have looked at the use and effects of medical jargon for medical terminology and contextual jargon, such as words that mean something different in common English, like complaint, to overly complex language. In fact, 20% of American adults read at or below a 5th grade reading level in mathematical concepts. Where in one study, many patients with at least high school education were still unable to explain a 9% what a 9% read. A minority of doctors, so 11% of one study, used strategies like checking for understanding during discussions. In a randomized controlled trial, 80% of patients say they could better manage their health problems with a letter of communication. Their doctor was translated into plain English. Further, patients often lead to the worst conclusion. A study about conveying findings of a pulmonary nodule, almost every patient thought they had cancer. But several of the doctors didn't even mention cancer when explaining results. So when medical jargon is used, the patients suspect their doctors are trying to avoid them, confuse them, or exclude them from care. They also perceive those doctors as less empathetic and less professional. Code switching is imperative in allowing patients to make informed choices about their care, plan for the future, follow up appropriately, and trust their doctors, all of which produce better outcomes. So in short, saying things in plain language can save not just lives, outcomes, and stress, but also years of torment. Someone I'm close with, now in her 60s and married for over 30 years, confided to me that she still felt constant guilt that she hadn't been at her first husband's bedside in his last moments. Okay, he had died of cancer when they were in their 20s. The doctor told me he was very sick, but I already knew that. I didn't know he meant my husband was about to die. We were very poor, and I was at work all night. When he called and told me my husband had died, I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And he said, "I did tell you." I was angry, and I said, "No, you didn't. You just said he was very sick." I didn't say anything more, but in my mind, I thought, how was I supposed to know that very sick meant dying? She was shocked and relieved when, upon telling me this story 40 years later, I told her she wasn't supposed to have known doctor was supposed to have told her to plain truth in plain words. 40 years of guilt and shame for want of plain language, a heavy cost that could have been avoided by code switching. Wow, this is a very detailed and deep story that are worth thinking about when it comes to effective patient communication. Yeah, alrighty. Okay, well, when, I think I'm just gonna call it good for tonight. I need to, or actually, I need to film another ASMR video. So I'm gonna have to hop off this live stream for now. But it was a nice quick live stream to see how things are going and just to get some practice in for doing ASMR live streams. So yeah, hope you found this to be relaxing